Up next, we have roll call.
Counselor Vihil here.
We might need a couple more to push harder. There you go. All right. There you go, Ms. Martinez.
Oh, I didn't see it. Maybe oh, I do see it.
Okay.
Okay, all counselors present with Counselor Carson. Not excused. Okay, he's previously requesting to be excused due to sickness.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, thank you. Up next on the agenda, we have the agenda approval. Counselor Counselor Griego.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as presented and excusing Counselor Carson.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not? Please start voting.
Counselor Vihil,
Yes.
the motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Up next on the agenda, we have citizen comments. This is the portion of the agenda where we ask anyone who's in the audience or on Zoom. If you have any comments, you can feel free to come up to the podium. We do ask that you keep your comments to within 3 minutes. If you're still talking at the 3-minute mark, I will politely ask you to end your comments at that time. So if I don't have any comment cards, Ms. Martinez.
I do not have any either, Mayor.
Okay. So we'll go and let's go to the Zoom audience and give them permission on how to raise their hand and be recognized and see if they would like to make any comments.
Okay, if you're on the Zoom app and you want to speak, you'll use the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a telephone, it'll be *9. And I don't see anyone raising their hand, Mayor.
Okay, I don't either, Ms. Martinez, so we'll go ahead and close the citizen comment section. And we'll move on down the agenda to consent calendar A. Counselor Griego.
Before I make a motion, I had a couple of questions. Is there a reason why we have 2 first readings in that consent calendar?
Yes, it's okay to have them as an ordinance for the first reading. These are 2 essentially housekeeping items.
Okay, I was wondering because there was 2 on there. And
Yeah, we've had some in the past as well.
that, Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve consent calendar as presented.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor Griego.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion. Thank you. In a second. Any further discussion? No? All right. Start voting, please.
Counselor Vihil,
Yes.
the motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, the Homeless Coalition Board appointments. Ms. Martinez.
Okay, so tonight you are going to be voting on the Homeless Coalition. We had 1 applicant apply to serve as the near homeless representative. So this board actually will have 2 vacancies now. But this representative, and then the substance abuse representative, this person has applied for the homeless and near homeless representative with a term ending June 5th, 2025. So I put ballots in front of you if you want to send those over to me, and Counselor Vihil, if you want to send me your vote by email, and then I can count it that way.
The recent vacancy for the substance use professional position, it was just recent, so we haven't really had a chance to advertise for that yet.
Okay, and it looks like you guys have voted to appoint Dean Hammond to this representative position on the board.
Okay,
So if you can make a motion for that.
I'll make a motion.
I will second the motion to approve Dean Hammond for a position on this board.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, thank you. Let's start voting.
Counselor Vihil,
Yes.
the motion carried unanimously.
Okay, great. Thank you, council. That brings us to the next item on the agenda under finance, public hearing and second reading for ordinance number 22-2022.
Thank you, Mayor. This
Welcome.
is actually an ordinance on that at first reading was on consent because it is kind of a housekeeping ordinance. It is to help make sure that our code of ordinances are consistent with state statute. In April of 2022, the Colorado legislature adopted Senate Bill 22-032. And one of the items it did was not allow the city to charge for a business license if the retailer does not have a physical presence within our community. Now, if they do sell within our community, they still need to remit sales tax. So none of that has changed. It's just if they need to get a business license or not. And so approval of this would just make us consistent with state law.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Brooks. Okay, so we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing for the second reading of ordinance number 22-2022 and ordinance amending section 18-32 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Alamosa to add a new subsection F, accepting persons not having a physical presence in Alamosa for the requirements to have a sales tax license. Okay. Have anyone in the audience right now who would like to make any comments as a part of this hearing? This is the time to do so. Feel free to come up to the podium. I don't see anyone in the audience who are coming up to the podium. So Ms. Martinez, I'll turn it back over to you for instructions for any of our participants on Zoom who would like to make any comments in regards to this public hearing.
Okay, if you're on the Zoom app and you want to speak for this public hearing, you'll use the raise your hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're on a telephone, you'll dial *9. Okay,
Yes.
I don't see anyone raising their hand, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. I don't see any hands raised either, so we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Bring it back to council. Councilor Henson.
I'll go ahead and move that we approve ordinance number 22-2022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please start voting.
And Counselor Vihil,
Yes.
the motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you, council. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, first reading of ordinance number 27-2022. Welcome.
So this is an item that snuck up on us a little bit. Thankfully, the Colorado Municipal League was providing webinars to help communities get ready. As it is, last year, the Colorado legislature enacted House Bill 21-1162, which is entitled the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act. And essentially, the act requires that large retailers defined generally with stores with more than 3 locations or with locations outside the state of Colorado, and retail food establishments, which is essentially most restaurants and fast food restaurants, charge a bag fee of 10 cents per bag. Local governments can set it higher if they so wish, as long as the costs are tied to remediation. This is for customers who are not bringing their own bags. This bag fee does begin January 1st, 2023, and it's intended to phase out the use of plastic bags entirely by 2024. It also addresses use of styrofoam containers, which should also be phased out. The act does require that 60% of the bag fee collected be remitted to the municipality, and that the municipality can handle the enforcement in the manner that we so see fit. So to be clear, this has nothing to do with whether or not this bag tax or fee should go into effect. That has already been happened at the state level. What this ordinance is doing is, should we get a complaint that a retailer or a fast food or a food establishment isn't doing what they're supposed to, we can follow up. Our first contact would be a conversation, maybe even second contact. But at some point, if there's not compliance, we need something in our ordinances so we can cite them through municipal court. Additionally, we want to ensure that if they are collecting that 60%, that they're remitting that to the city and not just keeping it. So the ordinance just establishes in our municipal ordinances to be able to do enforcement and cite through municipal court. It's not determining whether or not the 10 cents should be charged.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Counselor Griego?
I had a question. You brought it up a little bit ago. This is just for the bags, not the styrofoam, those little packages, or styrofoam is part of it also. You know how you go get a hamburger and they put it in a styrofoam?
Right, so the fee is just for bags. Styrofoam has to be phased out completely. I think beginning in 2024, they kind of phased the usage of styrofoam over time, but
okay.
they don't, establishment won't charge for styrofoam, but after 2024, they won't be able to use it.
No. Okay.
Okay, counsel? Yes, Counselor Daniel?
Mayor, I move that we approve on first reading ordinance number 27-2022, and ordinance incorporating House Bill 21-1162, and set it for a public hearing and second reading on January 4th, 2023 at 7 p.m. or as soon thereafter as it may be heard.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I had one comment.
Sure.
I know we had one counselor here that was asking for this about 4 or 5 years ago. And it finally came through, so hopefully this will help us save the world.
I have one question. Where does the other 40% go?
The establishments can keep it. It stays with the stores or the restaurants charging it.
It's kind of weird.
I assume it's for the operational cost of doing it.
I think it's primarily to discourage people from, or to encourage people to bring their own bags if they got to pay. So you got to do something with the money. And this helps soften the blow to retailers.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion. We have a second.
Mayor, there is, it's not a major point, but we do need to dedicate our 60% towards a certain use, which recycling is an eligible use. So you will see those funds being dedicated towards the recycling program.
That's good to know. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Please start voting.
Counselor Vihil?
Yes.
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, resolution number 18-2022, the second budget amendment for 2022 annual budget. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My mic's on this time, isn't it? I always do it wrong.
You're
Double
good.
check. So this is our second budget amendment for the new counselor on the podium today. This is a normal course of business. You went through our first budget process in October. What we're doing now is just looking for, there's items that have happened during the course of the year that have come to our attention that need to be addressed in last year's budget. So you have a copy of it. You've had a time to look at it. So we will kind of go through it as quickly as we can tonight. If you have any questions, and I'm going to quickly, please stop me and ask the question. But we'll kind of go through it a little quickly here. So if you open up to the resolution, and the first part of it deals with the revenue changes for the general fund. The first 5 items that you see there are all grant related, either getting grants or reallocating grants. You can see a negative $82,000 there that looks a little strange in revenue, but that's just because we got another grant for the co-responder program. So we're reducing our ARPA that we had for a co-responder, and we're so we can reallocate that in our 2023 budget. Okay. The other items to note in revenue here is the last item is $750,000 We actually have good news to report on the sales tax front, and we're able to put more money back into our budget. If you remember, in 2021 during the COVID, we had unprecedented growth in our sales tax, over 15%. So when we're budgeting for 2022, we didn't want to say, oh, we're going to be up 20% or, some crazy number. And so we held it fairly flat. But as the numbers come in, we're up about 5% from the year before. And so we wanted to reflect that in our numbers here so that we'll have those fund balances just so you can make proper decisions and know what's going on with that. Another item that I'll note, and I'll go over rather quickly, is that 900,000 that's right over the 750. So you're going to see 3 other $900,000 items on this. And so I just want to, we'll broach this real quick. This is like an accounting fix that we need to do. And it's not like a fix, but it's the end of the term for spending out the bonds that we got for the water several years back. And so when if you recall, there was excess funds with that bond issuance. Those excess funds were put into CSAFE and investment in the general fund to be spent on specific projects. Some of those, like water augmentation and other things, have taken a lot longer than we thought to get done. But we had a certain amount of time to spend those bond proceeds. So they've been spent, but they've been spent out of the enterprise fund. So the way that the accounting rules work is we need to make a transfer from the general fund over to the enterprise fund to cover those expenses because they were all paid out of the enterprise fund and the money was held over in the general fund and CSAFE. But in having done that, that freed up money in the enterprise fund that we can now dedicate to use for our levy. And so what we're doing is we're putting money back over to the general fund, and we're going to do an accounting entry that will show in Colo Trust a designated amount for this 900,000 for a future levy expense. So it won't be able to be used for anything else if you approve this. So that's why you'll see that number coming in and out, and it's a little strange, but it's just the accounting way that we have to show this. Moving on to the enterprise fund, we have a few things. The first item is just a grant that we need to account for. The second item, for around 193,000, are insurance proceeds that we got to repair the roofs of the water treatment plant. You'll see corresponding expenses for about 200,000 when we turn the page. And there we see that 900,000, the transfer for from the general fund coming into the enterprise fund to cover those expenses that were paid there. The next item in the capital improvement fund, the negative 150,000 in revenue, that is just an accounting entry, just a bookkeeping cleanup type thing, because we decided we didn't need to account for the funding for the housing and development plans through a transfer in there. We needed to just account for it in the general fund. So there's really no impact to the expenses on this side. This is just kind of like a cleanup entry to balance those things out. The last thing is just a very small entry, but we'll get dinged on the audit if we don't do it. And so I went ahead and put that $2,000 in for the fireman's pension because we're getting a little bit more property taxes than we had anticipated. And those property taxes get turned over 100% over to the pension fund. So there'll be a corresponding expense for that. If you flip over to the next revenue, it's the community recreation fund. The first, four items there are grants and donations that we received. And the last two items, the 65,000 and the 20,000, are just items because the golf course did great. And so they brought in more revenue, but then we spent more money because we did that. So we need to do the corresponding in and out in this budget amendment. So that's it for the revenue. On to the expense side and the general fund. I'm not going to go over every single expense. Again, stop me if there's one that you do have a question on that I may skip. The 900,000 transfer out to enterprise, we've talked about that. 29,000, you'll see that. That's where we decided that we needed to take advantage of some discounts this fall to get computers that were budgeted for in 2023. So you'll be seeing a 2023 amendment reducing us down our costs a little bit there too. So that's to take advantage of that. Skipping down to the police department, the first number you see there is for 45,000. And that's just a carryover that we had budgeted in the 2021 for a vehicle. Supply chain things we just got that vehicle this fall. So it took forever. So that was just a carryover for prior budget. The second 45,000 is expenses for the training foundation, and we get those reimbursed 100%. So there's a corresponding revenue on that. The third thing on police is one that the chief and I weren't real happy about, but we had an unanticipated 28% increase in the dispatch fees. We talked to everybody we could to try to get those down, and they wouldn't listen to us, would they, Chief? But we tried. So you'll also be seeing a budget amendment in 2023 budget because they're on a fiscal year. So that will increase on in January as well. We skip on down to support services. You can see the corresponding 82,000 reduction in ARPA for that one. That looks a little strange. So I just wanted to point that out. And we have 17.7 for security cameras that were paid for from an El Palmar grant. And then we have 85,000 that is allocated for the Walsh building purchase for the environmental study that needs to go to that and the boarding up of that building. On the streets, we have the big one there is for 145,000. That's a carryover for a matching grant that we had from the prior year for pedestrian lights. That still is in progress. That's it for the general fund.
I had a question before you
Yes.
move on. I'm sorry.
No, that's good, Charlie. What is it?
Okay, under police administration at 3,500 for the district attorney recall expenditure.
Yeah.
Are we gonna get a total amount of what we eventually spent on that project?
Yeah, we can. This 3,500 is the cash part that we spent on it. And we do have a schedule that shows like the salary time that was spent and the other things as well.
So,
And we can get that out.
so
to
Counselor
council.
Grego, it's a spreadsheet I had shared with council. I can resend it so
Yeah.
you have access, you still have access to it, but it'll pop it up to the top of your email.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We had originally put a placeholder for like 10,000 in there. So we're happy to say that we did not have to spend that much for those efforts. Anything else before I move on to the enterprise fund? The first two items on the enterprise fund, if you want to go ahead and scroll down a little bit on the screen, a little bit more, there we go. So there's a 70,000 in the water department and then a negative 70,000 in the sewer. That's just salary allocation between the two groups, just with changing positions. So that's just an in and out. We have 58,000 for lift stations, which was from a DOLA grant. 300,000 for a Main Street sanitary line collapse that you guys had been brought before council in July, but this is the formal adoption of that. And again, our 900,000 going to the general fund. And then the last thing there, 200,000 for those repairs for the roof at the water treatment plant. And as I said earlier, 193 was covered under our insurance. The other two things on this page, very minuscule for conservation trust and police pension. If you flip over or scroll down, whichever way it goes on yours, the last piece we have for this expense is on the community rec fund. First three items are grant related. The next two, we have a $64,000 item, and that's for an HVAC unit increase. That was also brought to the council earlier in the year, but this is the formal adoption of that. We have an increase in price on a piece of equipment. To get the equipment, it was almost 30,000 more than we had anticipated. We have 15,000 for an overage for a water heater, tank repairs. And then the last three items, the 65, the 3, and the 11 are all golf related expenses that were offset by the increases in revenue in the golf department. So that's what I have for your last budget amendment for 2022. Oh, I have one caveat that there could be, depending on the developments with the housing authority in the next couple of weeks.
Century
Go ahead.
Mobile Home Park, the
Yes.
SLV Housing Coalition.
With the,
Until we get the
That
final
works.
amount, we don't know what adjustment to do.
So the first meeting probably that we have in January, one of the meetings in January, we'll be bringing forth potentially another amendment, either to this budget or to the 2023 budget, depending on the timing of when we have to pay that out.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I thought you were.
That's
done.
fine. Any further questions? And then I'm done.
No. Are you good?
I'm good. You
Okay,
can
I
vote.
didn't mean to cut you off, so we're good. All right, Counselor Griego.
Well, if there's no further questions, thank you for the update there. I'll make a motion. We pass resolution number 18-22, second and budget amendment for 2022 annual budget.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Thank you so very much for taking your time and going through everything and bringing it to our attention. We appreciate it. Okay, no further comments. Please start voting.
Counselor Vihil,
Yes.
the motion carried unanimously.
Okay. Thank you, council. That brings us to the next item under Parks and Recreation, a motion to adopt the Riparian Park to Refuge Trails Master Plan presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to bring Mr. Chris Dunn with THK Associates back in front of you. If you recall, we had the work session on November 3rd. We've done some minor updates, some tweaks, some refinements to the master plan, and we're now going to take the next 5 hours to go over the 100-page document with you now. Mr. Dunn's just going to do a quick synopsis, but I do encourage you to go through the document. There's a lot there. This is the exciting culmination of almost 3 years of work. And, you know, we feel we have an obtainable, exciting, transformational plan before you. Thanks to CPW, 2 different CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife grants, funded this master plan work with some significant match from the city. To the tune of about $60,000 in grant funding. And then, you know, we backed it up with some conservation trust funds, which are dedicated for exactly this kind of purpose to municipalities and local governments. With that, I'll let Chris get started unless you have any questions of me.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. One of the things that, because CPW was providing some grant money for this, they had some requirements that they asked that this plan address. And so, and when the request for proposal was sent out by the city, there's very specific goals that they were asking the report to address. And then we've added some as we've worked through it as well. And so tonight, rather than go through because we've got about 15 minutes, rather than go through the whole master plan report, I've organized the presentation based upon the vision that was outlined and then how we've addressed each of those goals. And it really gives a good overview of what the whole master plan is. So if you could go to the next slide. The vision is really quite simple: to connect the refuge to the reserve and create a trails network through Alamosa that provides access for all of the community along this beautiful river, and also then connecting to all the other assets that you have within the city. I'll go to the next slide. The first one is capture the diverse desires, needs, and vision of the Alamosa public for future trail connections and development. This was done through a really extensive public outreach program, and we had some great partners. AHEC did an amazing job working with South Alamosa and some of East Alamosa as well. And we got much better response than we've ever seen before. So yeah, this plan reflects, and there's some interesting one area in particular that I'll point out as we go through this, but we feel that we address that. The second is provide equitable access to the trail network and river from all neighborhoods. And This slide that you're looking at shows the west side ditch that runs from the river down to the close to the Malm Trail. And so we're looking at, we're suggesting that the land between the river and the Malm Trail be put under control of the city, whether it's through easement or purchase of the property, and that this trail network be built. The other piece that we're looking at is on the north side of the river, looking at some of the property adjacent to East Alamosa and working some good connections through there. And then we're also looking at creating a new bridge crossing over the river down near the Chicago Dam area. So the next slide, please. Address conflicts between motorized vehicles, pedestrians, and bicycles. This is something that we feel is really critical to make this path safe and comfortable for use. The photo in the middle was taken from the downtown master plan and showing how festive these connections could be. We looked at it a little more pragmatically along the two bridges where there's very limited pedestrian safe connections going across the river on the vehicular bridge, is looking at a possibility of putting a cantilevered pedestrian bridge that would be tied to the existing bridge rather than having to replace the entire bridge. This is something that we've seen in other parts of the country, and that this is a very efficient way to do it. We've also looked at going under Highway 160 and is it State Street bridges as well, with some pedestrian connections and digging out beneath the bridge so that we can get pedestrians through there. The next slide, please. The next thing is looking at how to make the trail network more user-friendly. And so we're looking at how to formalize some of these trailheads with not only parking, but some picnic tables and some wayfinding as well. So, and in some instances, comfort stations, so that it just becomes really user-friendly from one end to the other. I'll go to the next slide. We've looked at additional two bridges. The image of the bridge on the right is more like what we'll be seeing at the Stadium Drive bridge that's been funded, which we think is a great success. And we'll talk about this a little later too, about leveraging funds and being able to use that money to use as your matching components for other grants. And we think you're in really great shape for getting more grants. So we're suggesting possibility of putting a bridge up at the refuge and then one down in the by the Chicago Dam as well, so that we have 3 dedicated pedestrian bridges making connections. What's wonderful about that is then you have all these series of different loops, and you can do probably 1 mile, 2 miles, up to as many miles as you want. So it's really exciting to think about that. Next slide. This is something that I mentioned last time, and this is some land that the square on the lower right of the plan that you're looking at is the old water treatment for East Alamosa. The other area is up where the railroad tracks converge. And we think that both of those areas are really attractive for future use. We'd love to see the upper one used for envisioned environmental and nature center that could be regional in scale. And we think if it was a big enough sort of vision, that it could attract national philanthropy and foundation grants. But you have a great story here. This is an amazing area of the country, and we feel that this could be a real regional destination that would complement the great sand dunes as well as what starting to happen down in Fort Garland with the cultural center there. So and as I pointed out last time, these two properties are really the only properties that have riverfront access on that side of the river with the riparian federal riparian reserve being controlling most of the riverfront. So that we think that this is critical on a number of reasons. Next. This is an area, one of the things that we feel is that along this linear network of paths, there's all these adjacent wonderful destinations and opportunities. And this was this cross section is right by the area called the Wilderness. It's 10 acres that the city owns on the south side of the river, across from Cattails. But what's interesting here is there's an old levee and a new levee. The new levee is the one on the left. Between the two is this sort of just kind of low area, but with the hillsides on either of it, side of it. The photo on the lower right is a picture of that area. And so we thought that it would be a wonderful place for a pump track. IMBA, who the city has worked with, the International Mountain Bike Association, has wanted to activate more outdoor use. And this would be a really fun, easy to complete area. And then to the right of that, within the Wilderness, we feel that this would be a great place for a arboretum, a city arboretum, that would highlight plants that historically have grown in the San Luis Valley. Next. We've also, in some instances, we just can't reasonably expect to get access, continue the levee trail. This area is looking down at area where a number of private homes own up onto the levee. And so in some of these areas, and some sort of creating a network of seasonal trails that could be submerged during high water events. And so this was one of the things that we were thinking that should be implemented as well. Next. And then cohesive feel between various trails and open spaces in Alamosa. There's a number of gaps, ownership gaps and trail gaps that we've identified. This is where we have created an appraisal and an analysis of the properties that right now, most of the gaps are south of the Highway 160 bridge. And so this is properties that we've identified that the city should pursue either easements or purchase of these. So next, please. And then develop the trail network to enhance Alamosa's visitor appeal. This is something that we feel through signage and connections that the trail network should be, and it goes both ways. So signage in downtown indicating where the trail is, and then when you're on the trail indicating where the university and downtown. You have some great assets here. And it's just, I'd say 95% of the people drive through the town and really don't understand the richness of what you have to offer. This one on the lower left, I'm assuming everybody's been out there, but it's a great story about Amelia Earhart. And then the one to the lower right is the river access. Your downtown is, I think, it's just amazing. It's got one of the best preserved facades in the state for the storefronts. It's really very cool. Next slide. And then Adams State University, and again, the downtown. Next. So the final one was create an actionable plan for project implementation. And so we've done significant cost estimating on all of the various components that are included in the master plan. And we have a guy in our office, Mitch Scarborough, who's studied landscape architecture, but he's been working for heavy general contractor, American civil contractors for the past 7 years. And he is passionate about this work, and he's part of THK. And so he's created a very detailed cost estimate with current numbers. We feel that with the plan, the implementation plan, the budget, and that it's very possible and encouraging to reach out to a number of different agencies. We think that you're perfectly positioned to gain more of these significant grants from these agencies. You've proved that you're responsible with the money that you get, that you fulfill your promises. And then what's wonderful is that this close to $5 million money grant that you've got for the Stadium Drive Bridge. It's interesting when you go for grants, they look at the, sorry, that was my 15 minutes. I'm going to blame that on Andy for running over. But what's interesting is that what the grant agencies look at the big picture, and the entire, including the stadium bridge, as part of the entire project. And so they'll see that close to $5 million as the ability to match those dollars with future grants. If you were running a business and doing that, it would be seen as kind of a little questionable, like, oh, I got this loan, but I'm not telling you that that's where this money, my equity is coming from. But it works out really well. And so I think that not only are you in perfect position due to the demographics of the community and where you're located, I think you're very desirable for additional grants. And now you have amazing amount of matching dollars, which will elevate you as well in the funding process. So that's all I have. And this is the plan showing just kind of where all these improvements will be taking place.
Okay, thank you. And I'll turn it over to council for any additional comments. Councilor Daniel.
Thank you, Mayor. I said this before in the work session. I think this is an amazing plan. I think it absolutely complements our comprehensive plan. I appreciate the depth of it and the connection of all of our communities. So thank you for that. It's a really fun plan. I did have a question about the link. When I clicked on it just in here, it said I needed to have access. Is that true for everyone?
So we were figuring out this, how do we put a live link into Novus? And so Andy thought he had fixed it by going into the original document and giving access, but it might have happened after you tried. Oh, sorry. So that was nothing to do with your
Okay.
question.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that if people though are looking at the agenda and trying to click on the link, that it's an amazing plan. So I want to make sure that people can see it.
Well, and I think the more important location is for us to get it on the website.
Website.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Griego. Thank you, Councilor Daniel.
One comment I got is that the plan shows all our community, not just one side of the community. So we have trails throughout the whole community. And for people to see that in the plan it's great, that it's spread throughout the whole community. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Griego. Okay, did we lose Councilor Vihil anywhere?
I'm here. I have a question, Mayor.
Okay, can't see you, but go ahead, buddy.
Thank you, sir. Great presentation. Thank you for all that. I wanted to see if you could maybe comment a little bit more on the partnership that you have with AHEC. What does that look like? And can you comment on that?
Yes. And Andy, you want to help with this? we needed to have some help to access the communities that typically wouldn't participate in the public participation. So we arranged and what you move that on.
Oh, when, you know, Counselor Vihil, when we did our original 2 outreaches, we took a look at those demographics and they didn't really match our community demographics. It was, you know, a lack of Hispanic input. I don't know if we had residential data where they live, but that would have made sense too, that maybe it was hearing from a little more enthusiasts who live on the north side. So we approached AHEC, Lisa Lucero's a good cohort. We've worked together before to get some targeted feedback, and they were able to translate our surveys, not just into Spanish, but, you know, I'll probably say this wrong, Concubal, and get some of the Guatemalan population in target areas in the South. And we got over 150 responses by doing that. And that's not much less than we got in our virtual and public meetings before we did that targeted outreach. So by doing that, it gave us a more representative sample of our community. It educated some folks that didn't even know we had trails. And we also learned about what their desires were, whether it's public gathering, using trails or fishing or what. So it was just crucial feedback, and AHEC did a great job. And I will have a strong partnership moving forward.
Well, I appreciate that. And I want to highlight that work because especially Lisa Lucero with AHEC and those guys. And I'm glad that you were able to get a pulse of the Hispanic community, especially the Hispanic community in different parts of town, specifically the South Side. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it was really important and influential in the outcome of the overall master plan.
Okay. All righty, thank you. All right, Counselor Daniel.
I move that we adopt the Riparian Park to Refuge Trails Master Plan.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please start voting.
Counselor Vihil,
Yes.
the motion carried unanimously.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, Resolution 16, 2022, a resolution amending firefighter stipends and titles.
Thank you, Mayor. With the new fire chief comes some new eyes looking at the operations and the structure. And one of the first things he looked at changing when coming on board and talking to Don and determining it was probably long overdue was instead of just having one assistant chief, probably having 2. Especially with a full-time fire department or volunteer department, that's pretty important. But as they've continued to look and more specifically look at management of a fire scene, they wanted to start pushing some of that training and that ability further down into the organization. And so the resolution before you has some minor changes to some of the titles. So instead of assistant chief, fire chief, which it was before, we're changing it to deputy fire chief, but the stipend is staying the same. Fire captain, that title and stipend are staying the same. And then we are looking at getting rid of this level, which is called the lieutenant level. It happens to not have anyone in it right now as well. So it's a good time to do that. And instead, what we want to do is have 2 different levels of what used to be called the fire engineer, but they were the drivers. So we want to have 2 different levels of the drivers. So if the individual doesn't want to do any extra training, take on any extra responsibilities, they will stay at fire driver 1 and the stipend would stay the same at 90. However, if they want to go through some set training and some requirements that would also allow them to do fire scene management, then their stipend could go up to 160. And so what this does is it increases the amount of training and offers an incentive for that. But it also ensures when you have a volunteer fire department, not all of the weight is being carried by just a few at the top to manage the fire scene. It helps to spread that capacity a little bit more, which we think is very important. So essentially, that's what the change is. The cost is estimated between 6,000 and 7,000, but we did reduce some of the operational costs by the same amount. So it's a budget neutral item before you.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Okay, Council Griego.
I had a question, in looking at these figures, it says firefighters get $50 per month. And then on the responding calls, it's $20 per call. Is that on top of the $50?
Yeah, so we wanted there to be just kind of a flat base. And then depending on how many calls they respond to, then they get. It was a very careful balance we had to do to make sure that we're not triggering them becoming employees by how we're paying per FLSA.
So that's just 20, is that $20 an hour or $20 just for that call?
Per call, if you do hours, you're getting into employment.
Good. So they can be out there for 10 hours, only get $20.
Don't pull that call.
Yeah, that.
What we did, Charlie, when we established that, I think it's been 4 or 5 years ago now, was look at average call lengths and try to come up with a figure
Yeah.
that took that into account. Sometimes you're going to get hit with a 3 or 4 hour call or
Mhm.
longer. Sometimes you're going to get hit with a 20-minute call. And so we looked at what our historical call lengths had been, and that's how that number was derived.
And it's been working fine.
It has. Also, I know it's a small amount there, but when you respond to the airport duty, why drop it? Is that? I'm sorry, the last point there says any member volunteer responded to airport duty, 1850.
That's the amount it has been. It's a pass through with the county. And you're just sitting there.
I just pointed out because I would just leave it all the same, $20, but
It's not paid for us.
what's not?
It's to the county.
Oh, we pay this you paid it to the county?
The county reimburses.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Counselor Daniel.
I'm excited. I always think change can be hard, but I'm excited about the ideas and the things that we're going to see. So thank you for that. But if there's no further questions, I move that we approve Resolution 16, 2022.
I'll
Second.
second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I just would like to thank Chief and Heather and the team for using another set of eyes to bring about this needed change. Thank you. All right, everybody, please start voting.
Counselor Vihil,
Yes.
the motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda. First reading of ordinance number 25-2022, an ordinance amending Alamosa section 1162.
Thank you, Mayor. This is, again, more or less a housekeeping ordinance, but less enough that we decided we'd put first reading not on the consent agenda. In the context of a couple of harassment cases that have arisen in municipal court, I had occasion to review our harassment ordinance and compare it against the state statute counterpart for harassment and asked myself why we have a provision that the state doesn't have, and figured out that it was because the state amended theirs some number of years after a Colorado court case came down saying that that particular provision was unconstitutionally vague. So that was the impetus to this ordinance, which takes out that provision from our ordinance, just like it's now gone from the state ordinance. And then in discussions with the chief, the notion that you might be written up for harassment for flipping somebody off, which was subsection 2 of our ordinance, just is not what the city is interested in doing. And so that's gone. And there are just a couple other housekeeping changes to update the ordinance to be consistent with the state constitution as interpreted by the courts and with our current practice.
Thank you, Mr. Squeezer. Okay, Council Cripps?
I looked over the ordinance, Eric, and I guess if you could just explain just a little bit more about the part about the public spaces and how that would relate to free speech.
I guess I'm not quite sure what your question is.
There's a place in the ordinance itself that would make it illegal for an obscene gesture in a public space.
Well, the reason for calling out public spaces there is we don't want to have the city stepping in to police how people interact with one another in their homes. So if you're using obscene language and insulting the members of your household, that's none of our business unless it gets to a level of domestic violence. But if you're following someone around Cole Park and shouting obscenities at them as they travel around on the walking path, we do care about that. So when it becomes a public kind of harassing people as they are out in the public rather than as they interact with each other in their private spaces, then the city cares. But if you're in your private space, we're not gonna get into telling you how you need to interact with other people in your private space. That's your business.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council Griego?
Okay, if there's no further questions, this is the first reading. I'll make the motion. We pass on first reading ordinance number 25-2022 and set it for a public hearing on January the 4th, 2023 at 7 o'clock or soon thereafter.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please start voting.
Counselor Behill?
Yes.
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. That brings us to the next item on the agenda. Our first reading of ordinance number 23-2022, an ordinance amending the established pay plan for the city officers and employees.
Thank you, Mayor. As council knows, the city manager can only hire positions as it is set out in the pay plan. And so if we need to make any changes, we need to bring it to you for approval. This ordinance before you has two different type of changes. So the first type is easier and much more straightforward and doesn't take much time. With that grant that we did receive for the co-responder program, in addition to hiring a second co-responder, so that's already in the pay plan, we can also hire a case manager. And so that position, we hadn't anticipated that. And so it was not entered into the pay plan. So it's 90% funded by grants. It's dramatically reduced the amount of ARPA funding that council had allocated for a much more robust program. So we did place that in grade F, and there's no financial impact because of the grant and ARPA funds. The second item that this ordinance is doing is much more significant. And that is essentially, we are shifting the entire street division. We knew we were having some issues when we started to see some turnover. And then more importantly, we would advertise and either get no applications or applications that weren't qualified, or we would do a skills test and individuals weren't able to necessarily do the level that we needed, for example, as equipment operator type of thing. It's a small department of only 8, but my goodness, they're probably, well, I'm not going to say that. You look at any department and they're all busy. They do a lot. And especially if the street sales tax and the expansion of the sidewalk program and putting up signs and striping and potholing and just about everything else. There's a lot going on with those 8. And so to have turnover of about 79.5%, they currently have 3 vacancies and they haven't been fully staffed since the third quarter of 2020. So it's been a significant issue. We put in some cost of what it costs to advertise, which is a little over $2,000, but that doesn't take into account the opportunity cost. So the work we weren't able to get to because we weren't fully staffed, or the impact on employees feeling like they can't take a vacation, there's just more stress, those types of things. So it's an issue. For us, then, we're not just going to change the pay plan, though. We needed to base it on data. And so Jolene took a look. We just did the market survey last year. We took those comparables and we went and got that information again. As Jolene was checking to make sure we were using the right comparable, she was talking to McGrath, and they indicated they've been seeing this nationwide, that these levels and skills for these types of skill sets have jumped nationwide, and that there's a bit of a shortage. We did add one comparable, which probably should have been added the first time because we do use it for police, which is CDOT, because here locally, that's a direct competitor for Mush Streets program. After Jolene completed that market data, we have found that most of the positions need to go up about 2 positions, 2 grades. And we know from those who didn't apply or those who have left that that's actually pretty close to what we're losing to and those types of things. So the numbers did play out to what we anticipated. However, from a budget perspective, the pay increases combined with the estimated fringe costs is about 106,000. So it's a pretty big change. What I did is I went 3 or 4 times through the budget on the general fund and managed to find about 72,900. So that big old budget amendment we just did, our first one for 2023, if council approves this, is going to have a lot of changes. Of that almost 73,000 that I think we can cut, there's about 20,000 that's best described as just tightening the belt. So instead of a training budget of 5,000, someone might have 4,500, some things like that. It's just really tightening. It's 23 different cuts to get to that 20,000, if that gives you a feel. So I've got the notes if you want me to go over all of them. But I thought you might want to focus more on the other 53%, which I think we're going to be fine, but it's the ones that you would probably want to be made aware of. And so I'm going to go over what those are. The first one is the reduction in the street division maintenance line item. Reduce it by about 25,000. That leaves a budget still of 50,000. And so Harry feels comfortable that we can still meet the needs that we have from a street maintenance perspective. Additionally, we're doing all the overlays and everything else out of the dedicated street trust fund as well. Also out of the street division is reducing the sign line item by 2,000. Several years ago, council increased that line item by 2,000 in case we ever needed to buy neighborhood watch signs, but we haven't. So my recommendation is instead of carrying an extra 2,000, if we get a group who's interested, we just do a budget adjustment at that point in time. So let's just get that extra 2,000 out and help us balance this budget. Another reduction in the street division is a $9,000 reduction, and that's in the equipment rental line item. That leaves a budget of 1,000. But with the new equipment that we've gotten in, we really don't anticipate having to do rentals. The only time Harry thinks we're going to need to do rentals is if we get an absurd amount of snow from a snowstorm. So if that happens, we can do a budget adjustment for whatever we happen to go over type of situation. That's knock on wood, right? Okay. Well, not in the city, snow all around us. Yeah. Then we went into other areas, and of those 23, almost every department has a cut type of situation. So this one is in the economic development, the art program line item. I am recommending reducing 5,000. That leaves a budget of 27,000. That is enough to do the rotation of art, the artist stipends, the art reception, that whole program. What that's going to shrink down is our ability to buy the art. However, what we can do every year is look to see how our expenses and revenue are performing. And if we have enough to do a one-time expense, then we can look at doing that type of thing. So this is why I told you guys you would want to be aware of this. Another is a $2,000 reduction in the police veterinary services. Essentially, I'm eliminating the trap, neuter, and release funding. It hasn't necessarily been heavily used, and it's something that if the community cares about, they can do some fundraising for that. The last reduction is cutting the landscaping beautification line item in about half. So it's a $10,000 reduction, but it does leave a budget of 10,000. Similar, I didn't say this for the art, but it's similar to the landscaping. I have a hard time justifying spending funds on art or beautification if we cannot compensate our employees at market rates. And I know that's a little pokey, but that's how I feel. I can review the 10-year graph with you. We have updated, as you heard Lisa talk about tonight, we're finishing out this year a little bit better on the revenue. That also then obviously when you multiply your revenue every year, that's a good multiplier kind of going forward. We were also able, because of that revenue, I don't know if you remember when we did our budget, around 2025, instead of having our 4% for the escalator for personnel costs, we had to drop it to 3%. We were able to put it back up to 4%. But we also increased our operating escalator for 2024 and 2025 because of inflationary costs. So if we do all of that, and Counselor Vihel, I'm sorry, I'm putting this up on my screen, but this is, I think it's an attachment in the agenda if you wanted to open it. This is the 10-year graph. This also includes, as Lisa covered, the almost 1 million that's dedicated to the levy. So there's not $1 million showing up in there because we know it has to go to the levy. So I know in 2032, it's looking not very good, but we've got time to see how revenue performs and to potentially make other cuts if we need to. So with that, that's the recommendation on this ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Brooks. Counselor Griego.
I had a question on your landscaping, where you're taking that money away. Are we looking at more at planting perennials instead of just buying a whole bunch of annuals every year and
So
maybe
we're
concentrate
testing
on something like that where
with the new planners, we're testing out to see if the perennials will work, because sometimes with the temperatures and those types of things. So if they do start to work, I think that's a conversation we're definitely going to have.
because it'll save you, because on these annuals that you buy every year, you're just.
And I'm not sure those are where all of this is coming from.
Pretty much.
Some of it is, but
Yeah.
not all of it. This one was kind of going towards those bigger projects we were doing, which we still need to provide an updated list to council on what could be planned for that.
Thank you.
Okay, Counselor Daniel.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you. It is obvious you went line by line, didn't try to make just dramatic cuts in one area. And I know that that can be challenging with as big as our budget is. And so I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate that a lot. And I think these make a lot of sense. And I agree with you. We need to pay our team at market rate. That's the only way we're going to keep really good staff. And so I appreciate the focus on that.
Thank you, Counselor Daniel. Counselor Griego.
With that, if there's no further questions, I'll go ahead and make the motion that we pass on first reading ordinance number 23-2022 and set it for a public hearing on January the 4th, 2023 at 7 o'clock or soon thereafter.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I too would like to thank you for being so thorough and also making sure you're putting our employees first when it comes to adequate compensation. And I also am happy that you and the department head, Harry, compared them to CDOT, because that's a real close competitor. Thank you.
And to clarify, because sometimes people get nervous because we can't always compete with the state, right? It's an average that's taken. So clearly putting CDOT in there impacts that, but it's not as if we're going to pay the same as CDOT, but they needed to be taken into consideration.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please start voting, please.
Counselor Vihel,
Yes.
the motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you, council. That brings us to committee reports. Do we have any committee reports? Counselor Griego?
I had when the Alamosa Homeless Coalition met on the 29th of November. There was some discussion on the movements of the soup kitchen. There was discussions on construction of affordable housing. there was a lot of discussion on the Century Mobile Home Park that Ms. Malgaris is sending through, so. And then I believe it's on January the 4th, or I forget what day, this coalition will come before council and give you a complete update of what's been going on and get you to ask questions or whatever, so. It's pretty good, so that's all I got, man.
So you have, okay. Council Cripps?
Thank you. The library board met at the end of November, and some really good news. Numbers are staying strong. They're continuing to go up and maintaining that high level of people utilizing the library services. The library manager has lots of wonderful ideas that she's been rolling out little by little, and they've been picking up steam. So I'm very happy to keep watching and keep being a part of it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Council Cripps. Okay. Doesn't look like we have any more committee reports, so we'll go ahead and go to staff announcements.
Okay. So tomorrow, we do have at 7 a.m. Counselor Connections, which I do believe the mayor and Andy, is it you? Counselor Connections tomorrow, 7 a.m. We did get a question from a resident on why we're not moving it around other businesses. And that is a value that the city would have, is to spread the love and the attention. The other value, though, is to try to get residents to show up, and they get confused easily. And so having one location, so we thought maybe a good compromise is we'll pick one location per year. And so then that way we're not, where are they this month? And someone just decides it's too hard to keep up and they don't come. But that way we can spread the love as well. And so I think Jasmine will be reaching out to other people who do coffee, and will be open at 7 a.m. and determine where we place it at 2023. So we thought that was a good balance for those two values type of thing. I did send an email. It was with very, very sad news that Lisa will be leaving our team. Some really, really big shoes, both just from a technical competency perspective, but she's just been great from a team perspective. And we've loved having her, but she's 100% made the right decision to place her family as a priority, and she couldn't be stretched too thin. And that's when you have to make those decisions. And so we are advertising, and she's given us plenty of time that hopefully if everything goes well, we'll have enough of a crossover and all of that. So just wanted to make sure if you've missed that email. This Friday, we do have the ribbon cutting for State Avenue. It's 2 o'clock, I believe, at the corner of State and 12th. Hopefully the snow's done. Then we do have our dinner next week with the school district on the 14th at 6 p.m. I think Holly's still kind of trying to nail down the location. So look for that information. I also just wanted to make sure for council and the public as well that we're really clear that, we always come from a partnership central perspective. And if there's conversations to be had, we'll be at the table and we'll have conversations. I know our chief is met with not only certain staff members, but also the school board on multiple times following that swatting event. And we'll continue to meet with them. They have seemed very focused on wanting to bring back the SRO position after they cut it a few years ago. And we, as a partner, I would love to be able to snap my fingers and say, sure, let's bring back the SRO program, but we don't have that money. It was just one position at that point in time. And when they canceled it, that was years ago. And I just showed you the 10-year graph. I mean, those funds are tied up into other areas within the general fund. So financially, it's just not an option unless we make cuts. But something that didn't really exist during that time that does exist now is there's a pretty healthy competitive market from a private perspective of security firms. So there are 3. We use one for our bailiff services here at court.
TSC uses one for their security services. I believe the hospital uses another one for their security services. So there are alternatives out there that the chief has been encouraging them to look into, as well as offering information on other security measures. But I just want to make sure that there is correct information out there, and as we prepare to have dinner, I understand why they might be focused on the SRO, but it's something that would be extremely challenging. The other, besides the cost, which almost makes it a non-go from the beginning, is we haven't been fully staffed in the police department, and trying to find someone who wants to do the SRO, which is slightly different than your regular police work, it can be challenging. And so we're not sure how successful and how much stress we'd be taking on trying to keep a position like that filled as well. So those are conversations that are going on, but we will continue to be a good partner. It just may be that we can't meet that expectation type of thing. And then I also wanted to share, we are continuing to get the pieces put in place to apply for grants for the demolition of the Walsh. And it could be that it needs to be done in 2 phases. In the meantime, and in between the 2 phases, we are securing it up more. Clearly, the first attempt, they got in and there is a small fire. We're doing more reinforcement that's going to involve even some metal. So it's going to be much more significant. Additionally, you will probably see streets crew, the 5 of them, out there this week into next, trying to demolish the patio area, the areas that would be safe for us to kind of get rid of. If we can get that cleaned up to where everything's visible, there might be little less nuisance behavior that's going on in there. So you will see some of that activity going on as well. And so I just want to let you know, we are continuing to work on that. Any questions?
No, thank you so very much. And I thank you for giving us that update on the school issue as well. Appreciate
you.
that. Okay. All right. That brings us to the next item, council comments. Have any comments? Counselor Riego and then Counselor Daniel.
Okay, this coming Saturday, the senior citizens are having their Christmas bazaar. So we invite you to come down and support them. They'll have a lot of food and different groups selling different stuff. Plus those cards that you bought, you might win something.
Okay.
We invite you to that. Thank you, Mike.
All right.
Counselor
Welcome.
Griego, do you know what time that is?
It starts at 8 o'clock, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yeah,
8
yeah.
until,
I think it'll go till about maybe 4.
Okay.
5 o'clock.
okay, thank you.
Counselor Daniel,
Thank you, Mayor.
you're welcome.
I just wanted to say, I think that the team Dalton did a really good job the other night in the lighting ceremony. That was pretty fun. I think we had a lot of kiddos out there. So that was pretty cool. The mayor did a great job as always, counting down. He always doesn't miss any numbers. So I'm super impressed with that. I just wanted to say, happy holidays. This is going to be our last meeting. It feels like a long time until we meet again. And so there are a lot of different holidays that people in our communities our community is celebrating. So I just wanted to say, I hope everyone has a happy and safe holiday time. They get to spend time with family. If they have people graduating from out of state, that they get to celebrate that safely. And so just really wish everyone the best.
Thank you, Counselor Daniel. Okay, I'll wrap things up. Thank you, Lisa, for your time and your service. I know you were real courteous enough to give us a little bit more time to have you around, but we appreciate everything you've done since you've been here. I also would like to send a shout out to Heather. She did a wonderful job yesterday in Pueblo, giving an awesome presentation in front of DOLA, requesting funds for the lift station, and Harry was there to answer questions and help out. Did a wonderful job. Good job. Okay, then encourage everyone, don't forget the Parade of Lights that's coming up to celebrate the holiday season downtown. Let's please do that. And also I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Daniel here for helping me out the other day and helping us out at the lighting ceremony and announcing the Artscape winner. And she did a wonderful job as well. She kept me calm. We both were freezing out there though, but thank you for that. Okay, That's all I have right now. I don't see any other mics on, and Councilor Vehill's light is not on, so this meeting is adjourned, but we are going to go into executive session, and we'll probably need a motion for executive session, and we know no further business will be discussed. Councilor Daniel?
Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 24-64024B and 4E to receive legal advice from the city attorney concerning franchise negotiation procedures and to instruct negotiators concerning unresolved issues of charter staffing of a local office as a franchise requirement.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, if not, please start voting.
Counselor Vihil,
Yes.
the motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Council, I believe we're gonna have the work session in there, or we're gonna do it here, okay? So how about you take a quick 5 minute and we meet over there at 8:25? Is that okay? For those you may need a short break.